let's jump into the app now and actually have a look at all of this while we're going, and then we can have a bit of a chat and we'll be nearing the end. So we're going to talk about the Lightroom app, we'll talk about the settings, and we'll go through some of these techniques for actually taking the photo as well. Okay. Let's see, beautiful. So this is the Lightroom app here. This is the little icon. I'm just going to open that up. When you open it up for the first time, you'll need to register just with a login of some kind, but it is free. So once you get past that stage, you'll be to this page here, which is the library. We'll talk more about this on Thursday. For the time being, we want to access the camera portion, which we can get to by clicking this little camera icon in the bottom right-hand side. All right, so this is what it looks like when it opens up. I'm going to run through all the steps to getting the most out of this app, but again, in the handout, these are all listed step by step as well. So don't worry too much about copying all these down. Just have a watch along, follow along, and ask me any questions as we go. First thing we want to do is turn the flash off. You're never ever going to want to use the flash in this situation. So just, yep, question? Sure, all right. All right, so we've got the app here. We've turned the flash off. Next to that, we've got the letters JPG. This is the file kind, the file type. I'm going to swap that to DNG, which is called a RAW file. It's a better quality photo. It'll work quite well for what we're doing today, but it's a little bit more difficult to work with. So we've got to do a few other steps like edit and export before we can actually use the image. Underneath all that, I'm going to go to these three dots here, and that's going to give me a few other options. Whoop. I've got my camera on a tripod, so I'm going to turn the self-timer on. Self-timer is really good because we can basically click the button, wait a few seconds, and then the camera will take a photo. There's no risk that the camera is going to move or shake while we're actually trying to hold it. Also going to turn the grid on as well, so this just helps with trying to get all your lines nice and square. It's always best, you know, it's incredibly difficult to get things perfectly square when you've got a rectangular surface like this, but the grid will help. You just want to get that as close as possible. I wouldn't stress about that too much. And then I'm also going to turn on something called highlight clipping. We'll see what that does in a second, but that'll basically show us, give us a little warning whenever we get to pure white in the image, and we want to avoid getting to pure white. Now that I've done all that, what I'm going to do is go down the bottom here. I've already got Pro mode on. When you open it up for the first time, it'll probably be in automatic, but you want to swap to Pro, which will give you these few extra options down the bottom here. If you've got a phone with multiple lenses, so you know, a telephoto and a wide lens, I'd swap to the telephoto lens. There'll be a little icon down the bottom right hand side here to do that. I've got an old phone with only one lens, so I don't have that. But the telephoto lens tend to be less distorted than what the wide angle lenses are. Okay, so now that we've done all that, next thing we're going to do is set the white balance. So you can see there's this WB here. I'm going to click onto this. I'm in automatic at the moment, but this is where I will use my grey card to set the white balance. I'll go to that little eyedropper icon on the very right hand side, and it's asking me to fill it with a neutral surface. All right. So what you do is you hold, this is a grey card, hold that in front of the artwork where you're picking up some of the light. I'm just going to move that a bit closer there, and then hit the little tick. And what that's doing is calibrating the light to this calibrated grey card here, so that the light source comes across as white light. Even though it may not necessarily be perfectly white light, the camera reads it as white light now. So that's quite an important step. Again, you can pick up a grey card for maybe 20 bucks or something on Amazon. Very worth the 20 bucks if you're going to be photographing things a lot. Once we've done that, just want to focus, and you focus just by clicking somewhere on the screen. Normally best to focus in the middle of the artwork there. That should ensure that everything is sharp from edge to edge. It's also chosen like an initial exposure by clicking on the middle of the screen too. And I'm going to lock that exposure in by clicking this little padlock down the bottom right hand side here. Now, when we're taking photos, the general rule is we want the image to be as bright as possible without losing highlight data, okay? So even when you're photographing, dark artworks, you still want to photograph them to be a little bit brighter than what they look like in real life, as bright as possible. And then what we can do is edit that back in the editing stage. And there's some technical reasons for that to do with how digital data is captured, but you can just trust me. It's better to be brighter than it is to be darker, if that makes sense. So the way that we make this as bright as possible is by using this last little icon, which is down here, called exposure compensation. So if I click on that, it brings up a little slider, and I've got +3 on the right hand side, -3 on the left hand side. Sliding it to the left will make things darker, and sliding it to the right will make things brighter. And you can see as I slide to the right, I'm getting these striped lines here. They are the highlight clipping warning. So that's telling me that this part of the image has gone to pure white. Doesn't matter too much if it's the white wall. It's more that you don't want to get it on the artwork itself. So I'm just going to keep pushing this to the right. And we can see at this stage, I'm starting to get a little bit on the artwork. So I'm going to pull that back a notch. That looks pretty good there. Okay, now last thing I'm going to do is grab my reflector, so my little bit of card here, and you'll just be able to see this happening in real time. If I hold that to the right hand side, I can start to reflect a little bit of light. So we've got no reflector and reflector, no reflector and reflector. And what I would do is just do that to taste, really, okay? I do have equipment to measure that sort of thing, but it's well beyond what you'll be wanting to do when you're just doing this stuff with a smartphone. Press the button and take a photo. Cool. Now, once you've taken the photo, the way Lightroom works is that it uploads your images to a cloud, okay? So it might take a couple of seconds for the image to actually appear in your Lightroom library, but once it appears in the Lightroom library, one last thing you want to do is just zoom in on it and make sure that it's sharp. Okay, so always best to do this before you sort of leave your computer or stop photographing. But I just pull that up, zoom in, and I can see nice and sharp. Actually, surprising amount of detail, considering that we've just captured this on our phones. And that's that. Basically, that's the process of photographing an artwork with your smartphone. Something that seems deceptively simple, but ends up being a little bit complicated after a bit of time. That image at the moment only exists in Lightroom, so we need to do a process called exporting to get it out of Lightroom, and that's something that I'll cover on Thursday. So this is the end of the session. Basically, if you've got any questions or anything I didn't cover, now's the time to yell out and ask.